In this video, we will see how to create multiple users on our Android devices. Having multiple users can be beneficial if a device has multiple users and we want to keep data non-accessible to them. Let's see how to do that. We have our Android device here. We will open the settings. Scroll down to find System. Open it. Here, we will find the option stating multiple users. Here, we can see all the users registered to use this device. Currently, we just have one user with the admin privileges. To let this device register multiple users, we will need to toggle this on. Now we can register multiple users on this device. Here we can create two types of users. One is a normal user, and the other is a guest user. We will see them one by one. But before that, we will see what these three options do. The first option is delete guest activity. When this option is toggled on, it will not give the guest user any option to save the guest user session. That means that once the guest user exits from the session, all the activity done will be deleted. Nothing will be saved. Next time when a guest user is created, a fresh new session will be created. If this delete guest activity option is toggled off, then, while exiting the guest user session, the user will get an option to save the session. If the guest user logs in again, the old session will be continued. All the activities will be saved in this case unless the guest user chooses to delete the session explicitly. The next option is allow guest to make phone calls. Right now it is turned off. In its off state, if we create a guest user, the device will not let the guest user make any phone calls except for emergency calls. The guest user will be allowed to use the device but will not be able to make any normal calls. But, if the option is turned on, then, the guest users can make calls normally. We will see about it during the demonstration. The last option is add users from lock screen. Note that only the admin of the device can create a new user. Let's see what it means. Right now this option is in the off state. We have locked our device, and we are on the lock screen. If we pull the quick access panel down, we can see the current user icon. Note that the current user icon only appears when the multiple user option is turned on. If we click on the icon, we can see only the list of users registered on this device. Currently, we just have one user on our device, so only one is listed. But, even though the current user is the admin of the device, we do not get any option here to add any new user. Let's close it and log into our device. Now we will toggle the option on. We will check again from the lock screen if anything has changed or not. We can see that the current user, who is the admin, is getting an option to add new users to the device. So, the Add Users from Lock Screen option facilitates the admin user to get or not get the Add User option from the lock screen itself. Now let's create a guest user. Note that delete guest activity is on, and allow guest to make phone calls is off. Click on Add Guest. Here click Switch to Guest. We are now switching to a guest user session. It will take some time to create the guest user session. It is like creating a copy of the device. The guest user account is ready. If we check the list of apps, it contains only the stock apps that came from the factory when the device was switched on for the first time by the user. Apps installed by the other user are not accessible to this guest user. Everything is like a brand new device. If we check the Files app, we can see that all the user folders are empty. Just like how a brand new device shows. If we check the internal storage, then, we can see that this guest user session has its own view of user files and folders. Nothing from the other user account is visible here. Let's go back and try to make a call. If we remember, we had left the Allow Guest to Make Phone Calls option off. This is the calling app. All kinds of contact details are empty. Let's dial a number and check. It says, only emergency calls are allowed. So, the guest user is not allowed to make a call. If we open the Select User option from the Quick Access panel, we can see that the guest user can either exit its session or switch to the other user, but it cannot create any new user. Remember that creating a new user is only permitted to the admin user. The guest user is not allowed to use the messaging application either. It says the app isn't allowed by the device owner. If the guest user wants, then he can sign into Google Play services and use it to install applications and use personalized Google applications like Gmail, Google Drive, etc. Let's exit this guest session. So, we can either select Exit Guest or choose another user. If we remember, the Delete Guest Activity option was on. So, now while exiting, we do not have any option to save this guest user session. That means, once we exit the guest or switch to another user, this session will be closed. Whatever the user did during this session will be deleted automatically. Nothing will be saved. We are exiting it. We are now on the admin user account. Now, let's create a guest user again. But this time, we will allow the guest to make phone calls. So, toggle it on. And, we do not want to delete the guest activity. So, toggle it off. Now let's create the guest user. The guest is created. Let's first check the messaging app. The guest is still not permitted to use the messaging app. Let's try to place a call. One thing to notice is that, now the recent call log of guests is sharing recent call logs from the admin user account. But the contact details are not shared. Let's try to make a phone call. Well, coincidentally, someone is calling me on my number. That means I am able to receive calls too. Let me decline it. Let us place a call. This time we are able to place a call instead of getting the "Only emergency calls allowed" message. So, if "Allow guest to make phone calls" is turned on, the guest will be able to make calls, and the recent calls log of the admin account gets shared with the guest. Now, let's exit the guest. Since we toggled off the option, Delete Guest Activity, this time during exit, we get an option to save the guest session. If we choose to save, all the guest activities will be retained and will be available on the next guest session creation. Note that only one guest session is allowed to be saved. So every time we create a guest session, the previously saved session will be available. But if we choose to delete for once, the session will be deleted permanently. So if you want to retain the guest, then choose to save it every time. If we want to delete the saved guest user session, then click on Guest. Then select Remove Guest. Clicking it will delete the guest session permanently. So this was about creating, managing, and removing a guest user on the Android device. Let me reset these options to default. Now let's see how to create another user, a normal user, on the device. Click on Add User. It says that a new user needs to set up its own space, and any user can update apps for all other users. Click Next. Here we need to give a username. We can select a profile picture for the new user. Now click Done. This will create a new user on this device. Here we get an option to turn on phone calls and SMS for this user. If it is kept off, then calls and SMS service will not be available to the user. Only emergency calls will be allowed. If it is turned on, then these services will be available to this user, but along with that, calls and SMS history of the admin user will also be shared with this user. Once it is decided, click Switch to New Username. Since the new user has to be set up like how we set a new device, it is asking for confirmation that the new user must be available to set up his account. Then click Set Up Now. This will start the process. My device is from Motorola, so this is how the user interface is. Other manufacturer might have their own interface, but the method is the same. These are some instructions for the new user. Click Continue. This will get the device ready for the new user. This can take some time. Once done, we will get an option to sign into the Google account. Through this, the new user can log into Google Play services. Since it is straightforward, we will skip it to save some time. Here we are giving some permissions to Google services and accepting their terms and conditions. Scroll down, and click Accept. Here we will select the search engine that we want to use. Then, click Next. At this stage, it is asking to set a device login PIN for this user. This user will be able to log into this device using this set PIN. The user can also register a fingerprint for logging into this device. We will skip it in this demo. The new user has now been added. It is like a new device has been set for the user. It has only the stock apps now. If we check the Files app, we can see that this user has its own user space. It is somewhat similar to the guest user. However, the guest user can have only one session, with more limitations, that may or may not be saved as per the option chosen. For a user, everything will be saved automatically and have very less limitations. Let's check the messaging app. Since we allowed call and SMS service for this user, the SMS entries of the admin user is shared with this user too. Let's check the calling app. Here also, the recent call logs of the admin user are shared with this user. Let's try calling a number. So, this user is able to place a call too. This user can use this device almost like the admin user. Let's check if this user can create a new user like the admin user or the owner of the device. Well, no. A user cannot create a new user like an admin user. Only the admin user has that permission. There are some limitations to a user account. So this is how a user is created on an Android device. Let's switch back to our admin account. In the multiple users page, we can now see two users. One is our admin account and the other is the new user that we created. If we want to delete the user account, then click on its name. And yes, from here we can also revoke the calls and SMS usage permission from this user anytime. So, to delete this user, just click on Delete User. Once we click Delete, this user will be deleted permanently from the device. Now we are left with just our admin account. To disable multiple user functionality on this device, toggle off the Allow Multiple Users option. So this is how we can create multiple users on an Android device. Not all mobile devices may support this feature, but most of the newer devices might have this functionality. And this functionality is very useful, especially when we are sharing our device with others. In this way, we can restrict other users from accessing our data. If you like this information, then please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for your time and patience. Have a nice day.